Your event is starting in 3, 2, 1. We are live. Welcome everyone. I just say hi in the chat. Tell me you can hear me. Don't say hi because people are doing that already, but let me know you can hear me. I'm Angela Fair. We're here wrapping up day 3 of our watercolor splash course. This is it's absolutely the worst way to get to know watercolor. In just 3 one-hour sessions, we just don't have enough time to really dig deep. I can give you this brief overview, but it's gonna fall short. There's gonna be stuff I didn't do that you're missing out on, unfortunately. It's just the limitation of the time that we have. The good news is there's tons of content out there for a learning watercolor painter. When you are getting started, a really good place to start is learning those basic techniques, because getting to know the basic techniques and feeling comfortable with them is a skill issue. It's teaching your hands what to do, getting to know the feel of too much moisture and not enough and everything in between. The best thing to do is log those brush miles. Put on miles, wear out some brushes, use up some paint, use up some paper. When you see that stack of paper, especially if they're failed paintings, know that that is the sign that learning is happening. When you're sitting on the couch thinking about painting and afraid to mess up yet again, you're not actually learning anything. You're not getting it done. We do need, and this is a little, there's always a flip side. We do need time for planning and giving our brains a chance to catch up to what we're doing. That's okay. I don't work nonstop on a painting from start to finish. I give myself space to kind of process what needs to be done and to plan. But we do gain skill through painting. So actually doing stuff. So here we are today talking about the next step, and I should pull my notes out so I don't ramble too much. I'm a chatty person. Why say something in one word when 10 will do? We're going to talk today about developing our watercolor skills. We're going to talk about ways to teach yourself watercolor. Some of the strategies that I use to help me to not just grow in skill, but also be keyed in and aware of my interpersonal style and thinking about what makes my heart sing. I don't think you have to start out in one style and then and then change dramatically somewhere along the way. I started out as a very detailed, controlled painter. If I had been more self-aware, I would have transitioned to loose painting a lot sooner than I did. Learning to trust myself and trust my own instincts was an integral part of developing my personal style. So I want you to be thinking about your heart and your instincts from the very beginning of your watercolor journey. Then you won't waste as much time as I did trying things that didn't get you excited. For me, I spent a couple of years sitting on my couch, as I told you previously, working to learn the skills and paying attention. So often it was a trial and error. Oh, well, I guess that was the wrong thing to do. And then learning how to cope with that problem that I created, those mistakes. We talked about mistakes yesterday, and it wasn't a fun topic. When we're thinking about making mistakes, it just feels bad. When we make mistakes, it feels bad. And I don't want you to give up on painting because you feel like you're struggling and not getting anywhere. You are getting somewhere, but it's a little bit of blind trust that has to happen as you're logging those brush miles. That's why I wanted to talk about mistakes yesterday. That's why I showed you me making mistakes and painting something that really I'm not very proud of and I don't feel like is a reflection of my skills. I wanted to show you those mistakes so that we could talk about how to cope when we fail, when we blow it. And so there's that. You'll be receiving an email from me at the end of this workshop with some links to help you. I actually have included in there a little demonstration of a much more successful flower. If you felt like, okay, well now Angela showed us all what not to do, how do we actually do something that's a little more dynamic? There's a link to a video lesson that will help you there. So we start out learning the basic techniques, day 1. Then we fail. We try to learn those basic techniques and they feel awkward. And Angela makes it look so easy. That's part of the magic of being a watercolor instructor, is that I get to make it look effortless. always looks more effortless when someone else is doing it. You don't see the mental and emotional struggle, and you also don't see the years of practice that come into that. We want to just, I'm going to pop my notes up here, and it might take a second as usual because I don't have the most efficient system. Okay, just a reminder, Nina is here moderating our chat. She will take down your questions during the broadcast. I get to answer them at the end. There are always fantastic questions. If I'm missing something, hopefully we can cover it in the Q&A at the end of the broadcast. So just do that in the chat. So we want to talk about, itchy nose, sorry, creating conditions for success. Here we are, we're learning to paint, we're developing techniques, we're making mistakes, and we want to develop a personal style, and we struggle. Some of that struggle is physical, actually mastering skill techniques, but a very big part of it is often the mental battle. And this is something that you have to learn to deal with because it doesn't go away just because your skills have grown. Artists of all skill levels, from all different disciplines, struggle with self-criticism. They struggle with the ego and other things. So we want to, one thing I really think we need to be aware of is asking yourself, is my mind a safe place for creativity to emerge? I read a book recently on leadership, and it was more directed at corporate culture, but I found that in teaching watercolor and actually in thinking about my approach to creativity, it was really helpful as well, because it was talking about how in a management situation, you need to give your employees space to freedom to share ideas. So they need to be able to share bad ideas without fear of being criticized or belittled or whatever. They need to feel heard, and that's the way you get innovation and the most creativity from your staff. And in our situation, we need to let our creativity out by making our mind, our studio space, our painting time a nurturing situation. If you are painting and you're looking at your painting and going, this is terrible, there is nothing good about this, I don't have what it takes, I can't do this is a big one. How is your creativity going to feel safe to emerge when those are the thoughts that are running through your head? We have to actually intentionally choose to reframe in positive ways. Wow, those colors did not work well together. Now I know I can make different choices. Or that's the best color to make that muddy neutral that might work in a different painting situation. It didn't work here. I have nothing to result from this painting session, no painting to show anyone, but boy, did I learn a lot. I put a lot of time into this. I put a lot of energy into this, and I know I can trust that that's growing me to be a better painter, even though you can't see it today. One of the things I repeated to myself, I think there's a cycle that we go through where painting goes well for a while and then it starts to get harder and we get blocked. We might feel like things aren't turning out. And when I'm in that situation where nothing is turning out, it is a learning cycle. It's the obstacle, the breakthrough that I need is around the corner. I always, when my children were small, and I had 3 babies in 3.5 years, and so I was in that baby stage for a long time, and I really observed that when my children were, just before they were about to learn a new skill, they would get really cranky, really grouchy for a while. And it was like their brains were moving faster than their physical capabilities. And it was that dissatisfaction and that crankiness that propelled them. It pushed them to master that next skill, whether it was sitting up or crawling or walking. They kind of had to get grumpy first. Their brain just was a little bit faster than their body. I think we're in the same situation as watercolor learners. We have places we want to go, but it's a struggle to get there. And so when I'm in that place where nothing's turning out, I take a deep breath. I repeat to myself, this is a learning cycle. A breakthrough is right around the corner. And in 20 plus years of painting, I have never been wrong on that. There's always, at some point, something turns on and everything, and then you have this sweet time where everything's going well until the next learning cycle starts again. And it's really exciting when you hit that breakthrough, but you have to struggle first. A few creativity killers, and you've been reading the screen, so you already know. Negative self-talk, which we talked about. Overly dependent on outside approval. Small children, Mary in the first lesson today, the earlier session, commented that her grandchild told her, "I like how my brain feels when I paint." When we're small, we paint for the love of it. And then at some point we start to worry about what other people are thinking, and it kills our creativity. So many people quit painting, quit drawing, quit writing because they start worrying about what people are going to think. We have a fear of failure. For whatever reason, we're afraid that we just don't have what it takes. And yet if we're painting because we love it, we don't have what it takes to do something we love. It just doesn't even make sense. I think we feel like we need to earn the right by painting really good stuff. And if we're doing it for the joy of it, that's the qualifier. And then we have perfectionism. Our ego says, you can't, don't let anybody see weakness. You can't fail here. And so we have to put ego aside. We have to put our fear of failure away. We need to make a safe place for that creativity to happen. I don't want to talk all through the lesson here, but I do want to go over just a couple of other things. I believe there are stages of competency. Spelling mistake there, sorry about that. Competency, we have 4 stages. We go through them in the same order, but we cannot predict or anticipate how long it's going to take us to get through each one. This is where we have to decide. I might not be the fastest learner, but I'm darn sure I'm going to be the most stubborn. And that's kind of what I decided. I don't get to choose, how good I am at art. I just get to be really stubborn about pursuing something that I love. We start out as unconscious incompetence. We start out painting. Maybe you took a painting class where you had something turn out that just surprised you with what you were able to do. Beginner's luck, right? Unintentionally, not knowing what we don't know, we create something good and it gets us excited. And that propels us to want to pursue this. When we get to that stage of conscious incompetence, this is the worst place to be because this is where we get overwhelmed and people very often quit. When you take that beginner's luck and you see what you made in those first early paintings, and then you start trying to do those things intentionally, it often feels like you're going backwards because, here you have this beautiful painting you did early on with these lovely strokes, and then you're trying to do it again. Well, that's the difference, isn't it? Because before it was unintentional. It was an accidental, happy accident. And then we have to learn the skills to be able to be a little more intentional. So it's a frustrating place to be. Consciously incompetent, conscious of that we don't know a lot. And I think this might be the longest stage to get through. That is why my passion is, if it's going to take us a long time to learn this, let's make sure we have fun while we're learning it. And we're going to talk about that more today in our lesson. And then we have conscious competence. You get some skills under your belt. You get to be able to be intentional about a few things. You like making blooms. You have a little more control over your edges. And you have some favorite colors you like to mix. And so your brain is a little more free to start thinking about personal style. But you're still definitely having to, exercise your brain power in thinking about how to implement those skills. You can do it. It just takes some mental work. And then unconscious competence. This is a pretty sweet place to be. This is where I've kind of found myself over the last couple of years. And it's so much fun to be able to be relaxed about how you use watercolor techniques. That little trick of making it look effortless, that's where this comes in. And then you get to really feel free to broaden out and express yourself much more freely. And it's worth the journey. I don't think that there was a time when I just hated watercolor and hated my journey. I always worked to choose to love what I was doing and do it for the joy of painting. And then all of these stages kind of fell into place as I kept painting and logged those brush miles. So how we get there, how we get through these 4 stages is, again, experience, taking the time to paint. I mentioned this in our morning session. I'm going to say it again. There are so many times when I felt like I should go paint. I had set aside time to paint, and then that fear of painting kept me from going out and actually doing it. You're not logging brush miles if you're not actually physically painting. So we don't have any excuse, really. We put those miles on even when they're bad miles, even when if you're driving on a road trip and the scenery is terrible for a while, you're still getting there. You're still going towards your destination. So it's okay. It's okay to do some fails in that procedure. Your body is getting the muscle memory it needs to move the brush in more confident ways. Your eyes are observing how the water is reacting on the paper and how the paint moves. All of those things come together gradually as you stubbornly persist. And then the other thing I wanted to show you, and I'm going to just change the screen so you can see my full head. There we go. The other thing I wanted to talk about was growing into knowledge. When I teach a workshop, I have students from all different levels of ability come to those workshops, and talking about in-person workshops, and then you're giving a lot of content at once. And I'm doing that during this series as well. I'm giving you a lot of information, and not all of it is stuff you're going to be ready for. And our brains are actually amazing filters. The stuff that we're not ready to hear is just going to shoot over our heads. Sometimes we don't even hear that it was said. We don't even notice. And that's a readiness thing. We're filtering out information that we're just not ready to use. And that's a good thing. And in an online class situation, that also means that when you re-watch a class, as you've continued painting and growing, you get a little taller, and the things that shot over your head before start to hit you right in the forehead. They hit you right here. They soak in down to your heart, and then they come out your fingertips onto your painting surface. And this is a time-consuming process, but it's a thing that happens. It just naturally happens, and I've seen it myself when I'm actively painting, and then I go and learn from an instructor who's ahead of me. I'm so ready to hear certain things that they say just hit me right here. They just blow my mind, and then they filter down and they come out in implementation, usually after the workshop. I don't ever expect to do good things while I'm in a learning session. I give myself permission to make a lot of messes as I absorb all that information and process it. So think about that. Give yourself that space to learn and to make mistakes. When I'm implementing learning in the studio, and this is where we're going to switch over to the work surface and start painting, I try to alternate between doing serious intentional paintings where maybe I'm doing more research and planning, and doing some fun warm-ups. And I really work to keep myself feeling inspired, feeling relaxed and free. And if I'm not feeling loose, I can't paint loose. So I need to feel relaxed. I need to pay attention to my body language. That's why I stand to paint. I just have a looser feeling than if I'm cramped up over my work surface. And when I notice that I'm starting to feel a sore back or neck, if my movements start to cramp up, if my hand, which was starting in the middle of my brush, starts to move down and clamps down on the ferrule like this, I know I'm not painting loose anymore. I need to take a break and try something else, or walk away and just breathe, give myself some space. I pay attention to my mindset, positive thinking, and I pay attention to that body language. Okay, so we're going to flip over to the work surface. Voila. And get prepared to do some serious fun painting. Okay, repetition is a big part of what I do. I think if you want to paint confidently, you need to know your subject really well. And so I often paint the same subject over and over again. I work to themes. I have favorite colors that I will use to death. And whenever I come into the studio, I always try to do a warm-up. I want to get into this mode where my mind says, ooh, I really like that. And where I'm feeling like things are flowing off my brush. If I am not feeling that way, I don't expect that I'm going to be able to paint in a loose and fluid way. So we're going to start with a little bit of ultramarine violet here. And I should have moistened my palette. Air is very dry here today, and I'm almost out of water. I upgraded my spray bottle to a cheap one that does squirt out. Okay, so here we have some violet. The very first thing I'll do is I'll take a piece of paper that has a failed painting on the back side, and I'll just start to make some color happen. Oh, I like that mark. And that's maybe the first thing I'll do, is just use the side of my brush to put some paint on the paper. And in this case, I'm not wetting down the paper first. If you are a person who tends to work with a lot of control, has always formally been very detailed, your approach instead might be to wet your entire paper first and do wet and wet washes to help you relax, to force you not to try to control that very first brush stroke. Because as soon as I look at this brush stroke, I think, oh, that looks like a flower petal. Maybe I should make a flower. Instead of thinking about my goal of being relaxed, breathing, and just being present in the moment, we're going to dot some color in, some phthalo turquoise, into this wet area. My goal right now is observation. It's paying attention to my feelings. It's forgetting about the to-do list and the laundry and the errands I need to run after the broadcast this afternoon. And just forgetting about the 200 people watching, or however many of you there are right now, and just trying to be present in the moment. Sometimes a little bit of distraction helps. Playing some background music might have you thinking about the music and not worrying so much about the painting. Sometimes I'll actually play a song and try to move my brush to the rhythm of the tune that I'm listening to. I'm making little holes in my marks that I'm making. I just think it's kind of interesting what's happening here. Giving that wet color a chance to mingle. I'm actually trying to paint with the pigment as saturated as possible, really trying to get a rich amount. The ultramarine violet doesn't go super dark. If I have 90% pigment on my brush, that's as dark as it gets. So if you want a really rich, dark royal purple, you're better off choosing carbazole violet or dioxazine purple, dioxazine violet. They're a little bit darker. They can actually be a near black. And one thing I know before I started this was that the phthalo turquoise is a really good partner to violet. They make a really beautiful, rich, dark blue when they mix together. So I'm using information that I already had to help me as I warm up and explore. And then that's using information that I have. I'm not always trying to just completely reinvent myself and do everything unexpected every time. But I might decide that I want to introduce a new color. I'm going to grab this one. It's Aussie Red Gold. It's a beautiful kind of orangey yellow. And the common consensus is that Aussie Red Gold doesn't mix very well because it's a multi-pigment color, and there's some science there, and we don't need to worry about that as you're learning. Just you try out the colors you have and get to know them. So that means it might not mix very well with the colors I already have on the paper, but we're going to explore that. And it makes kind of a greenish effect. Right now I'm only mixing it in small doses into the main area of the painting, just kind of getting a feel for it. And I'm not committing myself quite yet to anything too dramatic. Interesting that when I touched it up against the turquoise here, the turquoise actually pushed into the Aussie Red Gold rather than the Aussie Red Gold, the new color, pushing into the turquoise. Different paints have different dispersion rates. They will move differently. So really getting to know your paints will help you to mix them more confidently. And that's why I recommend working with a small range of colors, really getting to know them. Try to have a warm and a cool version of each primary, and really get to know those before you start introducing new colors, and then introduce your new colors in small doses. So as I've been talking, I've been painting. Now I have a bird. Look at that. There's the bird's body. I don't know if it has a head, but there's a wonderful word for it. Maybe somebody can remember it for me, because I'm not going to remember it right now. There's a wonderful word for our tendency to see things, see animals in cloud formations, to see shapes in a watercolor wash. And yeah, I'm not going to remember what it's called. It starts with a P. Anyhow, so here we are doing a wash, seeing things in it. I'm just creating a little wing right here. Look at that. Maybe it's a butterfly. But it doesn't have to be anything. I think that's where we tend to get really tight when we're painting, is as soon as we start to see stuff in our paintings, then we feel locked into making that stuff look real. Maybe it's just like a butterfly. Maybe it's the dream of a butterfly. When we're dreaming, and maybe your watercolor warm-up should be a dream time. When you're dreaming, isn't it funny how you're like, well, I was driving in my car and then all of a sudden my car turned into something else, and we feel, in the dream, we feel absolutely no surprise or sense of wrongness when this happens. It just is something that happens. And why not have that permission to do the same thing in your painting? I'm really liking the way the turquoise is moving there. Look at how it just feathers out on that wet paper. So I'm observing, I'm reacting, and I'm taking my time. I'm not in a rush, just fooling around. And I will do this warm-up, this playful warm-up, for as long as it takes. If I'm not liking what's happening, that's okay. I'm still learning. I can also decide to take things in a completely new direction. I might grab my indigo and create some dark shapes to overpower maybe an area I'm not liking. I really was liking that orange, but this is just showing you there are other options. It's not too late to change the entire direction of the painting. And because this is a warm-up, this is just working with the paint, paying attention to what's happening, observing and reacting. There's not really any planning. It's just about feelings. It's about trying to be one with the painting, one with the paint and water. So what does the painting want? And that's a key to loose painting, really, is thinking, what does the painting want? What does the painting need? Yes, I have a reference photo. Yes, I have an idea in my mind, but I have to balance that out with what's happening on the paper. And this can be really fun. If I were new to painting, I'm doing this on a 9x12 sheet of paper right now, but you can do it in a much smaller scale. Do playing card size playful sketches. And then you don't have that burden of having to fill the whole page with a beautiful mass of shapes. I don't know what to put in this white area. We're actually going to set it aside because I have another kind of warm-up I want to teach you. But I just encourage you, pick 2 colors and just make some shapes. Let them flow. Let them flow together, and don't be afraid of that. Then add in a 3rd color. Let some lines happen, or work wet and let everything flow together. Make your goal to be about observing and doing a little bit of reacting, and really work to relax into that process. You learn so much when you're willing to kind of just slow down, pay attention, and enjoy the beautiful moments. There's a really beautiful area right in here. I just think that is so pretty. We're just going to have a moment of silence for that piece of beauty. And enjoy it. So it's a piece of beauty that no one else might see but you, and that's okay. It's your beautiful moment that you get to enjoy. Just you and your communing with your artistic soul. Okay, so communing with the artistic soul. If that was too, airy-fairy for you, we're going to move over to do something else. We're going to talk about how we can use warm-ups to make landscape paintings. And anytime you want to paint a subject, then we have this battle of wanting to control that subject. And so we are looking at this reference photo, and I chose a reference photo that's a little bit dull and a little bit bland. I think I took this way back when I didn't even have a very good camera. I've learned a lot about photography over the years of learning how to take my own reference photos. And the good thing about a bad reference photo, if you're not a great photographer, you can be very excited about that, because when you have a poor reference photo, that means you get to really exaggerate and take artistic license to new levels. When we have a great photo, and I have one over here, I'll show it to you. Here we have a photo with a lot of light and color and contrast, and this is a beautiful photo, but then my goal in this photo is that I would want to copy what I see, and then I get locked into rigid detail. And so when I have a bland photo, then I get to start thinking about improvising, making changes to make the painting more interesting. And what I tend to do, my very first version of any reference photo, if I haven't painted it before, is I tend to get locked in on that detail, trying to paint it just what I see. And repeated efforts, painting over and over again, help me to get to the heart of the painting. What is it that drew me to take this picture? What is it that draws me to paint it, that inspires me? What's the focal point? Where's the area of greatest contrast? How do I paint this so somebody might get a little bit of the feeling of being there? And those are the questions I'm asking myself. And taking a drink of tea. Okay, so we're going to divide this in half and just work on basically postcard size. And we're going to start getting to know this reference photo by painting it in a single color. And this is called a value study. And for many years, I didn't do value studies. I would spend hours and hours on a painting of a reference photo, and then I would be discouraged because my reference photo, because I'd spend all those hours and tried to fix all the mistakes that happened as I was painting, and I ended up with a painting that just wasn't very good. It was maybe as I got better, it was maybe a fairly realistic depiction of the scene, but it didn't have any life to it. I'd labored over it so hard and so long that my expression had suffered. I'm just going to turn that so I can reach my indigo. So when I started doing a little bit of prep work, being willing to paint something more than once, being willing to spend a few minutes exploring the values in the scene. I'm painting the sky right now, that lovely bank of clouds up above. Learning where I could get away with exaggerating, where I might want to make adjustments. All of those things helped me to paint more confidently and to make the scene my own. Because we are painting in one color and we're doing this as a very quick sketch, we're not going to worry too much if the colors run together. We're just taking the time to explore where the lights and darks are in this scene and how they impact our painting. I don't love the boardwalk, so I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist. And that's artistic license. I have this lovely lake right here. It's actually a slough right near my home. It's a marshy area. It's full of birds and mosquitoes, many mosquitoes. And I have sat at the banks of that marsh and painted before as well. And listened to the birds, and I don't have any great stories to tell you about seeing amazing wildlife or anything. But it's a nice place to go. So now we have our checking the scene. I just very quickly painted it. As you can see, the colors have run together, and indigo is a marvelous color for creating blooms. You can see all the little fingery blooms here that are really quite pretty. I'm going to darken up my foreground just a little bit. And I wonder if I'm going to put a thin wash of color, that's too much, over my lake so it's not so bright. And this gives me a chance to look where the contrast is in my scene. The darkest area is that line of trees in the distance. Then I decide, what else I want to do with the scene. Maybe I want to paint in these bushes here. And then I need to decide, are they brighter or darker than those background trees? How do I keep them from blending together? I do a lot of problem solving in this stage of my painting as I'm working on that value study. Value studies can be done, should be done in a couple of minutes or less. They can be done smaller than this. You can do them in pencil if you prefer to sketch. You have lots of options for value studies, but they make you a more confident painter because they teach you to see the areas of contrast. If I were to fail to see the areas of contrast and painted everything in a similar contrast, and I'm going to show you that. Come on, water. Guess I should have refilled this bottle. It's almost empty. If I were to paint everything in kind of a middle value with very little darks, I didn't rinse it away perfectly. Let's do a little bit more. With very little variation in value between dark and light, in the foreground and the background. As you can see, I just washed away everything that was interesting about my painting. There's a tiny little edge in here that's now the most important thing about the painting because it is the darkest area and our eye goes right there. So learning to think in terms of value. Where is the darkest colors? Where are the lightest? How much contrast is there between the two? That gives us a chance to create some areas of impact that are the first thing the viewer looks at when they look at your painting. Strong, dark, just instant impact. So it's a good thing to learn. And playing with just one color means that you simplify your scene. You don't have to be worried about what colors you're mixing. You're just focused on the values. My next step might be to spend about 5 minutes or less making a color study. And that's what the other half of this paper is for. And I'm just going to quickly close a blind here before we have sunlight bouncing off and throwing all our lighting off. In the winter, it just feels so wrong to close blinds when the sun starts coming in, doesn't it? Okay, so I have here a color I mixed this morning, a nice gray, and I mixed this using ultramarine blue and burnt umber, and I way overdid the burnt umber there. So we go back with some more ultramarine blue, where we're looking to make a blue-gray, so we know we need a slightly higher proportion of blue to brown. I'm getting close to needing some fresh water here. There we go, diluted it just enough so I should be able to paint myself a sky. This will give me a lovely gray-blue for my sky, maybe a hint more blue. And I don't clean my palette because I have some lovely neutrals in here that I can work with and mix new colors from. That palette dirt can make some of the very best subdued neutral tones for shadows, backgrounds, landscapes. So I'm working with that blue-gray, and then I need a green. We're going to start with our green gold, and again some more palette dirt. And let's go to the ultramarine blue since we've already been using it. That gives me a bit more of a deeper green. And maybe a tinge of the burnt sienna, kind of an orangey brown. We'll see how that looks for our distant trees. So we'll throw those in. And they really want to flow, that's okay. This is a color study, so we're just studying the effects of the colors on our landscape painting. We also have a distant row of hills. I want those to be blue, maybe a little bluer than that. The colors you choose make a big difference in how your painting is depicted. The mood of your painting is really affected by your color choice. And just small changes make such a big difference. Okay, I'm adding a little burnt sienna, this time over in this corner with a little Hansa yellow. I had to find a yellow to use. We'll use the Hansa yellow light. This is going to make our field area. And I have all kinds of color creeping down into my lake. Not worried too much about it. Again, I'm focused on trying to get the colors down. I can do yet a third study if I really want to explore the relationships of the different elements of the painting. There is no rush to go into that serious painting when I don't feel confident that I know the scene. I'm going to go a little darker with my cloudy sky. So I am exploring value a little bit here too. That's a little bit of a browner gray, and you can see how it makes it even more brooding in the scene. Also going to just lift right here. And I'm going to just try lifting a little bit here too. We've got a lot of movement of that green up into the sky. That's not really ideal for giving me a feel for the scene. And if I had all kinds of time, I might do this in stages, and that would probably be a third stage of exploring this reference photo, would be to take a little more time and do a slower version where I'm trying to fit these two elements together. Really taking my time, and I want to show you this. So one reason I can call this a warm-up, first of all, is that we're trying to stay loose. We really don't want to zero in on the details right now. I don't want to say, oh, I see green and kind of a beigey yellow in the foreground, so let's figure out how to put that in. I'm just trying to look at it as large masses of shapes and study their value and their overall color. From there, I can decide if I want to tighten up and add more detail, but I have to be able to be loose first. So I really try to work on my mindset. Now I want to show you some paintings that are good examples of this. I didn't actually prepare this in advance. They're just nearby because I do this technique so often. I think I showed you previously how I had done a sketch using watercolor graphite, and that's a really fun way to explore value. You don't have to use watercolor, but if you're really getting to know watercolor, using a value study, again, it gives you your brush wielding abilities, knowing how much water to use. You're building those skills as you're exploring also your ability to depict value. I had a reference photo I took of a panoramic scene, and I've been trying it out. I tried it out here following my value study in different colorways. I did this kind of violet and green version, very cool feeling. And then I did this warmer version in rust and violet. And it's amazing how different they feel. They're basically the same painting, but they just have different mood because of the different colors chosen. I've painted this scene about 6 times already. One of the larger versions, come to mama, is this one here. And you can see I've used more colors here. I felt like since it was bigger, I needed to spend a little more time on the detail. My actual favorite part of this painting is these fascinating brush marks that are here. And I made those using this Loose Goose Dagger Striper brush. But I'm not 100% sure I love the colors here. It just seems too many colors for the quiet scene I wanted to depict. And so I keep coming back to these little paintings. Even though they were little and intended to be sketches, the things I did on these papers make me very happy. And I would like to frame them because they just make me happy. And that's my criteria for whether or not I like a painting. So just because you're exploring in a study doesn't mean it won't eventually get framed one day. You might create something tiny that you really love. And small, beautiful paintings have just as much merit as big, beautiful ones. So those are 3 ways that I inspire myself, that I warm up, try to get relaxed and into a creative mindset here in my studio. Sometimes I'm just playing to play, to explore color and shape and mark making. And other times I go to working out those problems that are presented by my reference photo in value studies, in color studies, then getting a little more into detail and shape, exploring the way the elements in the painting fit together. And I learn so much when I'm willing to say to myself, this is just a sketch. This is where you're figuring things out. You have freedom to make mistakes and freedom to do it in your own way. I'm going to take your questions here. So we're going to switch over. Jeanette's saying, I have about 50 little sketches that are going to be fabulous someday. Yes. One thing that I do is that I don't give myself a timeline to, I really don't try to have deadlines that I try to keep to. And I don't say, you know what, this is the painting I'm going to work on. I'm going to work on this reference photo for, until I get it right and it's going to happen this month. Sometimes I have reference photos that I've been working with for well over a year, reference photos that I've pulled out after several years. Repetition has made me more confident. That's why you don't see me painting portraits and cityscapes. I'm painting things that I know and love, things that fascinate me, and I'm not feeling pressured to make big changes to my subject matter because maybe people are tired of seeing Angela paint trees. I'm going to paint what fascinates me and what pleases me. Okay, just taking a drink and I'm going to answer your questions here. Thank you for being patient with me while I showed you some different techniques. And Nina's been compiling your questions into a document. I'm going to just find it here and then we'll go through some questions. As we are, oh, for some reason it's not loading for me, Nina. As we are painting, okay, no, sorry, I was painting and I was in my creative zone, and so now I have to get my brain back into teaching and thinking zone, I think. So as we have been learning together, I've talked a little bit about Watercolor Mastery, my 6-week course that's coming up this spring. This is an online course that you can sign up for starting March 5th. This is what it is intended for is if you are not a beginner in watercolor, if you've started to feel your brain, that cranky toddler we talked about, if that's you, if you feel like you need to develop your personal style and you just don't know how to get there, I understand. I was struggling in the dark myself, trying to figure out who I was as an artist. It's a deeply rooted identity thing. And so we need to be patient with ourselves as we work through it. But I don't think you have to feel alone. I think there are steps that you can take. I've seen them in action. Steps that you can take to become a master, to develop a mastery mindset that is expressing your personal style and using artistic principles to build strong paintings. And that's what Watercolor Mastery is about. Starting March 5th, I have my information series. I feel like I've told you this so many times already. I'm sorry if you're getting tired of hearing it. I don't want anyone to miss it who is needing this course, and that's why I'm bringing it up again. This course has provided breakthroughs for so many artists as we look at the artistic principles that build a mastery mindset and that develop your personal style. I want you to be a fearless, heart-led artist, and I want to help you along the way. I want to be your coach and advocate and your biggest fan. Well, your second biggest fan, because you need to be your first biggest. And so sign up. Look in the description below the video. I have links there for you to sign up so that you can hear about the course, hear about those principles that make up that mastery mindset. I'm going to be sharing those and decide whether or not the course is right for you. If you're not ready for watercolor mastery, I'm happy to help you in other ways as well. You'll be receiving an email at the end of the workshop here. And that email will have some links to help you. It's got a demonstration, a little free lesson just for you. And I also do weekly videos here on YouTube, Friday Night Painting Club, we call it. And so that one of those starts at 3 o'clock today, or actually in about, I'm looking here, in about an hour after we finish up. So if you're not on the same time zone as me, an hour after we're done here, you can check YouTube, my channel, Angela Fair, and join in on that Friday night lesson. And on learn.angelafair.com is where you will find all of my other courses. There are step-by-step tutorials for beginner painters, and there are transitional ones where I really talk about the decisions I make. Once you've learned watercolor techniques, the next step is learning how to be a good decision maker, knowing which techniques to use and when. And I really try to talk about that in all my lessons in my courses. Let's just take a look here. No, Nina, for some reason the bootcamp questions are not coming up for me. I'm going to log out and then back in and see if that helps. And in the meantime, I have a couple of questions. Stephanie asks, what colors do you use for a limited, do I recommend for a limited palette? It's really hard to recommend colors, Stephanie, because because there are so many. So I can't say this is the only red you should use and this is the best magenta or whatever, because there are just too many, and I will exclude one that's really great, and then someone's going to email me and say, but why didn't you mention that color, because that's the best one of all time. And so what I recommend is use principles to help you decide which colors to choose. Choose a warm red, like a tomatoey red. Try to look for one that's listed as transparent. Choose a cool magenta type red. Again, try to choose one that's listed as transparent. And I do have links to colors that I recommend in my recommended supplies in the description below the video. So I dig a little bit deeper there. I also recommend that you check out, I still can't find that. I'm just sorry, just waiting on the questions to load. And signing it. Bear with our technical difficulties. Google decided not to let us share this document all of a sudden out of the blue. Okay, Nina. Oh, there we go. I think I just found them. I just wasn't looking far enough. Okay. Next question. Have I used Aqua Bee watercolor paper and what is your opinion? Bee paper, Aqua Bee paper, I've used it once. So I'm you know, fully an expert. No, not really. Aquabee, as far as I'm aware, makes several different grades of paper. Again, when you're looking at paper, general principles, 100% cotton, look for that slightly toothy texture as well. Do I ever wash your failed paintings off the paper and reuse the paper? I haven't really spent a lot of time scrubbing my paper. It's a thing you can do, definitely. And when you're using that really good paper, it works actually to take it under the tap and just run them through. So it is a thing you can do. I don't do it very often. It's funny, you know, I just really see value in problem solving my way through a painting. And so I don't spend a lot of time trying to back up and erase what I've done. I've learned a lot. Cindy asks, after the upcoming Watercolor Mastery course in April, when is the next one? I do Watercolor Mastery usually twice a year. So it will happen again, I believe, in October of 2019. So if you can't make our April session, jump on the list anyhow. I will let you know when the fall one starts. Linda asks, can you comment when you were painting the moment or stage you could stop, let it dry and begin again? I should have, you're right, that would be a useful thing to learn. I do demonstrate that in my lessons on learn.angelafair.com. I often will walk away and then we come back and work on the next stage. Unfortunately, during this series, because we're just doing this for an hour, it's, you know, we don't have time to walk away and let things dry. So Lucy asks, how do you deal with negative comments, and has it happened to you? Negative words are hard to forget. Negative words are so hard to forget. We let them define us and it sucks. It's not fun to have those thoughts in the back of your head that, you know, this is terrible. One of the paintings that I was really proud of, somebody made a negative comment about, and one that kind of questioned my technical abilities and my ability to evaluate my own work, and it turned out to be a really good thing for me, actually, because I think when you receive negative comments, if you never receive a negative comment, you don't know what to do when somebody says something negative. And what I found out was when somebody said something negative about my painting, something critical, I had to decide, do I believe them and just turtle up in shame, retreat to my corner, or do I own my own feelings about the painting? Criticism can be helpful. It can help us grow. Non-constructive criticism, that's where we have to say, you know what? That's your opinion, but I'm so proud of this work that whatever you say, it doesn't matter to me. And it was a growing step for me to realize that person's negative criticism didn't have to define how I felt about my painting. I think that's a long-winded answer to basically, yeah, it doesn't have to define how you feel about yourself or your work. And realizing that is actually very freeing. Hootie asks, any recommendations for cost-conscious framing? What I like to do is, framing is just expensive. That is one of the biggest downsides of watercolor. I do have on YouTube here a tutorial on how to mount your watercolor on a wood panel. This can actually be a really affordable option. And I like it because it gives a contemporary look that hangs really well alongside paintings on canvas. And and also you don't have the barrier of glass then, or the fragility of glass framed paintings. So do check that out if you're interested in alternatives. Otherwise, be really conscious of the size you're painting. Paint to standard sizes, 11 by 14, 5 by 7, 8 by 10, 16 by 20. Those are all sizes that are easier to find frames for. I would encourage you, however, to use acid-free matte board and backing board so that your painting paper isn't compromised by the acids that can be in the cheaper matte board. Julia says, you said before that you paint on both sides of your painting. Have you ever later come back and really like both sides, and what would you do in this instance? Sometimes I do like both sides, but usually there's one that's a clear winner, at least on that given day. So I haven't ever had where I had to actually choose between two that I liked equally much. So yeah, it's just that question of, do I really love this painting, or do I love the other one better? In fact, actually, my very first teacher, Edna McPhail, she had donated a painting to the art gallery for their annual fundraiser. And it was donated unframed. And when they received it, they flipped it over and there was a painting on the backside, and they preferred the painting on the backside. So the art gallery made the executive decision to frame it reversed, which wasn't the painting she'd intended to give them for the auction. So I'm not sure how Edna felt about that, but that always makes me laugh. Do any of your warm-ups become a finished painting? Donna asks. Frequently, actually. Every one of my paintings I will call a sketch until I decide to frame it. So in my mind, I really try not to differentiate between this is just a sketch and this is a serious painting. That's hard to do when, for example, I'm painting on something where I've specially prepared the paper, like the big canvas I showed you yesterday. I stretch the paper on canvas stretcher bars like you would a painting on canvas. With that much prep, it's really hard not to feel pressure to make a perfect painting. And so then I had to deal with my mindset of letting go of that pressure and how do I do that. Zdenka, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, says, I've been watercolor painting on and off for about 2 years, but I still feel like a beginner, like I still need to really know the basics. When will I know if I'm ready for the next step? We talk about that actually in the Watercolor Mastery Preparatory Week. That's March 5th to 12th. And really, I mean, sometimes I just feel like I'm right back to the basics too. Watercolor often feels, it's not complicated, watercolor. It's a handful of techniques that we have to learn how to wield better and better. And so there are times where I just feel awkward and childish just as much as I did the first time I painted. And I don't know, it's just an interesting thing. I think we are often more ready than we think we are, and also less, I think. There's both sides. Sue asks, how do I know if paint is transparent? Usually the manufacturer will tell you either on the tube, you can find out different qualities about the paints, or you can look it up on their website. Again, Handprint is a great site. Jane Blundell has a lot of extensive research as well. I'm not a paint researcher. Like, I really just, as soon as I start feeling like I have to do homework and research my paints, I just lose interest. I choose colors because I just love those colors. And if they're opaque, I find I recognize that as I've grown in experience. I use opaque paints at different times than I would use more transparent ones, and I mix them differently as well. And so I have paints in my palette that I use all the time for mixing, and I have some that I just always use by themselves because they're not friendly to be mixed with other colors. Becky says, when your friends and family tell you that everything looks good, how do you know if and when to believe them? It's really wonderful to have the support of people who love your work. As I've gone on painting longer and longer, I've started to hear things like, you know, oh, I wish you painted more realistically. That's from my mom. I don't really understand your paintings anymore. That would be my husband. I'm not sure if he ever really did understand my paintings, but I don't understand half of what he says about hot rods, so that's okay too. So when you're getting a lot of praise, it's really wonderful. Do take it with a grain of salt, because I think it's wonderful to be supported. But again, you have to get back to, am I letting this praise make me complacent? And am I then worried about pleasing people so that I want to keep that praise coming? Let's focus on painting again to satisfy yourself. And when that inner artist is being satisfied and fulfilled, what other people say just doesn't matter as much. It's a really good feeling to say, oh, this made me feel so good. I don't even care that I have, whether or not I have a painting to show for it. I just did it because it made my brain feel good. And we're getting that back to that childlike way. I think it was Picasso who said, I'm going to get it wrong, that it takes I'm not going to get it. There's a wonderful quote about how it takes a lifetime to basically unlearn all the things that we've learned as artists and get back to painting in a childlike way. And somebody who knows that quote, knows what I'm talking about, can leave that in the quote, or leave that in the chat. Hootie says, I have trouble knowing whether a paint color is warm or cool. The reason you have trouble with that, Hootie, is because none of us do. when it comes to paint temperatures, they are warm. If there be a paint color will often look warm when it's beside a color that's cooler than it. So it's a relative thing. In fact, if you're painting everything in blues, your cool red, when you add it in, will look very warm in comparison. So it's a contrast thing. And working with color temperature, it is just pretty much always like that. Sue says, sometimes do you look at a painting much later and say, well, I like this, or not so bad. Why did I think this was bad? All the time. I am not objective about paintings the instant I've painted them. Sometimes I think it's the best thing ever and then regret framing it too quickly. Sometimes I think I'm really attached to negative feelings about it, and I have to give some time for those negative feelings to go away so I can see how the whole painting looks. We get obsessed and fixated on one mistake in our painting, and we fail to see that everything else is working together and no one else will notice that mistake. And so it takes time and to get that objectivity back. Judith asks, could you do a workshop on how to use opaque versus transparent in a painting? How and when to mix them and when not to? It is a good thing to think about. I'm always planning new subjects for my YouTube lessons and for our upcoming watercolor community. In June, and this is my first time telling anybody, but in June, Robin and I, my assistant Robin and I, have been working together to create a collaborative community for watercolor artists. This is going to be a private place for members of my Angela Fair watercolor community. We're going to be learning together. There's going to be more in-depth lessons. We'll be going through courses on learn.angelafair.com. We'll be going through those courses together in our community site. We've been testing out some different options for communities over the last 6 months or so. It's taking a long time to put this together because it's really important to us to get it right. And fortunately, we've found, I think, a system we're really liking. And we're going to be trying it out during Watercolor Mastery, and then if all goes well, launching that in June, where we get 24/7, 365 opportunity to work together and learn together, going through the different lessons and building skill as a community of watercolor learners who are kind of obsessed with loving watercolor. So if that's you, stick around, stay on the mailing list, and we'll keep you posted on when that opens up. We're so excited about it. We're just about to wrap up here. I want to thank you for being here for this 3-day boot camp. There's so much I would like to cover, and we just can't do it all in 3 days. We just can't. So there's more I want to share with you. Do check out the links in the description below the video. Some of the content, the things I will think will encourage you most and help you grow can be found if you sign up on those links. Come back next week for Watercolor Mastery, our information session. And just stay encouraged. We paint for the love of it. We want to get back to that childlike love and faith in what we're doing, and finding that fulfillment in just letting that creative inner person out to play and have fun on the paper. Freedom to paint and do what you love. It's just freeing and it's life-changing. So thanks for being here. Thank you, Nina, for moderating. Feel free to send me an email if you have further questions. info@angelafair.com. Visit angelafair.com to, there's a contact me form there as well. And I'll be back in about an hour with a brand new video for my Friday Night Painting Club here on YouTube. So bye for now. Thank you. Stink. It's not letting me sign out.